Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Victor Newman had prepared for war many times in his life, but nothing, not even decades of battles with Jack Abbott, Adam's betrayals, Ashley's schemes or corporate takeovers, could have readied him for the soul-shattering realization that the person who had just pierced him deepest was not an enemy at all, but the woman he had loved, protected, forgiven, rebuilt, rescued, supported, and fought for more times than the world could count. Nikki Newman, the heart of his empire, the light of his darkest years, the partner he believed would stand with him until the end. Yet now the very woman who had quietly, methodically, and devastatingly stolen the secret core of his AI master project, and delivered it straight into Jack Abbott's waiting hands with the full intention of watching the mighty Newman empire collapse brick by brick. And as Victor paced alone through the dimly lit corridors of Newman Towers late into the night, the neon skyline reflecting in the glass like broken shards of the past, he felt something he never expected to feel at this point in his legendary life. Actual heartbreak, something raw and heavy, something that made his chest tighten the way it had when he buried his mother or when his daughter Victoria nearly died, something that came not from a business defeat or a personal misstep but from betrayal so personal it made his entire world tilt. He had built the AI program as both a legacy and a shield, a way to ensure Newman Enterprises would remain untouchable long after he was gone, a system capable of predicting hostile takeovers, blocking cyber attacks, restructuring corporate weaknesses, and even identifying internal threats before they could strike. But the irony burned him. That last function had not triggered the true threat, because the true threat had come wrapped in trust, in vulnerability, in whispered reassurances that she supported him. Nikki, battling her alcoholism again in secret while pretending to be stable, had let her resentment fester. She believed Victor's AI obsession was creating danger. Danger for her sobriety, danger for their family, danger for Genoa City itself. She heard talk around town. Fears that Victor's program was too powerful, that it could be misused, that it could change the balance of power not just in business but everywhere. And when Jack, exhausted from fighting to protect Jabot from Victor's silent corporate strikes, approached Nikki not as an enemy but as a man afraid of losing the remaining piece of his family's legacy, Nikki felt something twist inside her. She felt empathy. She felt guilt. She felt an obligation to stop Victor before he went too far. And so she made the choice that sent shockwaves through her marriage and the entire Newman dynasty. She infiltrated Victor's private server room, using access codes she was never meant to have, stolen at a moment when trust had blinded Victor to her internal turmoil, and copied the AI core architecture onto an encrypted drive the size of a thumbnail. A simple device, insignificant at a glance, but capable of destroying everything Victor had spent his life building. Nikki handed that drive to Jack in the back corner of society, her hands shaking, her stomach churning, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Make sure he can't hurt anyone anymore." Jack looked at her with a mixture of shock, fear, and profound sorrow, not just because of what she was doing but because he knew what it would cost her. And now Victor, discovering the breach through a series of system alerts that spiraled into undeniable proof of treachery, stood in his office gripping the printed security report so hard the paper crumpled into a trembling ball, his eyes burning with something harsher than fury, something colder than vengeance. He was hurt, deeply hurt. Because this wasn't a hostile takeover. This wasn't Adam going rogue or Victoria seizing power or Nick walking away. This was Nikki, the woman who had vowed to stand beside him, deliberately choosing Jack Abbott over her own husband, choosing to sabotage him to protect a rival who had stabbed Victor in the back more times than anyone else alive. The heartbreak was so consuming that for a moment Victor couldn't speak. He simply lowered himself into his chair, staring at the AI interface that now lay gutted and compromised, aware that Newman Enterprises would never be the same again. He thought of all the moments Nikki had pleaded with him to slow down, to consider the consequences, to think about the family instead of the empire. He thought of her tears, her relapses, the nights she trembled in fear of losing herself to alcohol again. And yet he thought of her promises too, promises that she supported him, promises that she understood his need to secure their legacy, promises that she believed in his vision. Every one of those promises now felt like a lie. And as Victor replayed security footage frame by frame, watching Nikki enter the server room in a dark blue coat, her hair tucked back, her eyes swollen with conflict, he felt a tear form. Not out of failure, but out of the crushing realization that the love of his life had stopped believing in him. Meanwhile, Nikki stood alone in her suite at the ranch, hands clasped together, shoulders hunched, staring at a bottle she refused to open but could not look away from, because guilt was clawing at her like a wild animal. She knew Victor would discover everything. She knew she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She knew that the moment Jack used the AI secrets to launch a defensive counterstrike against Newman Enterprises, the war would become public, brutal, and irreversible. But she told herself she had done the right thing, that she had saved Genoa City from an AI system she didn't fully understand, that she had prevented Victor from making a catastrophic decision, that she had acted out of love. And yet her heart felt like it was splitting open because the truth was much simpler and much more painful. She had betrayed Victor because she was scared, because she felt powerless, because the only way to stop the monster she believed he was becoming was to take away the very weapon he believed would secure their future. Jack, meanwhile, was in his office at Jabot, staring at the encrypted drive with trembling hands. He wanted to destroy Victor's empire, but not like this. Not by exploiting Nikki's pain. But the stakes were too high now. If he didn't use the AI secrets, Victor would eventually crush Jabot. And so Jack began rebuilding the code, turning Victor's creation into the very tool that could dismantle Newman's infrastructure from the inside out. As the digital war escalated, with departments crashing, subsidiaries panicking, stockholders demanding answers, Victor made one final decision. Not out of rage, but out of heartbreak. He walked into the ranch, saw Nikki sitting on the couch with tears streaming down her face and whispered, "It's really over. You ended us." Nikki sobbed, begging him to understand, but Victor simply shook his head, his voice breaking as he added, "You didn't just betray the company. You broke something in me that will never heal." And as he turned away, leaving the ranch in near silence, Nikki collapsed into sobs so gut-wrenching they echoed through the empty rooms, while Jack, realizing the magnitude of what he had helped unleash, feared that for once in their decades-long rivalry, no one, not Newman, not Jabot, not even Genoa City, would survive the fallout intact. And thus, the world of the young and the restless braced itself for a war not born of greed or revenge but born of heartbreak, moral conflict, and the shattering truth that sometimes the deepest wounds are inflicted not by enemies, but by the ones we love most. The fallout from Nikki's betrayal didn't take long to ripple through the very foundations of Newman Enterprises, like a shockwave that left nothing untouched. Victor, normally a man of meticulous control and near-omniscient foresight, found himself stumbling through the corridors of his company in disbelief, each step heavy with disbelief and rage, his mind replaying every interaction, every shared memory with Nikki, every whispered reassurance that had now been transformed into an instrument of his undoing. He called an emergency board meeting, summoning his closest allies and executives, but even the most loyal faces, Faith, Victoria, Devon, and even the old guard who had stood beside him through decades of corporate warfare, couldn't offer answers, only stunned silence. "The AI, it's gone," Victor said through gritted teeth, his voice low but vibrating with the raw anguish of a man who had seen his life's work ripped from under him. "And Nikki gave it to him." The room fell silent. No one dared challenge him because Victor's heartbreak was so palpable it felt like a physical weight pressing down on every chest. Meanwhile, Nikki, secluded in the safety of her own home, waged a private war with herself. She hadn't expected the depth of Victor's reaction. She hadn't anticipated the silent, crushing despair that lingered in the wake of her actions. She thought, at first, she was doing the right thing, that she was stopping Victor from spiraling into a kind of power-driven obsession that could harm everyone he claimed to love. But as the hours stretched into days, she realized that she had not saved anyone. She had shattered her marriage, jeopardized Newman Enterprises, and handed Jack Abbott an advantage that could very well end Victor's reign forever. Jack, on the other hand, moved with strategic precision, balancing a precarious moral tightrope. He knew Victor's fury would be unmatched, but he also understood that Nikki's betrayal had created an opportunity too critical to ignore. Using the AI secrets she had delivered, Jack began implementing a slow, calculated dismantling of Victor's empire from within, targeting divisions, initiating covert audits, leaking financial reports, and restructuring Newman's subsidiaries to gain leverage over the stockholders, all while staying just beneath Victor's radar, careful not to provoke an immediate explosion of vengeance that could destroy both of them. And as the tension in Genoa City reached a fever pitch, Whispers of the betrayal spread among the elite social circles, with Sharon, Phyllis, Adam, and even Abby trading incredulous glances and hushed conversations, each speculating about how a man as invincible as Victor Newman could be so utterly blindsided by the woman he loved. The scandal alone was enough to dominate headlines, but the real war was happening in real time behind closed doors, with every email, every memo, every board meeting becoming a potential battlefield. Meanwhile, Victor's personal life began to crumble alongside his professional one. Victoria, torn between her loyalty to her father and her sympathy for Nikki, tried desperately to mediate, while Nick, still reeling from past betrayals of his own, struggled to reconcile his love for his mother with his understanding of Victor's pain. Victor himself refused to eat, refusing to sleep, pacing endlessly through his offices at Newman Towers, gripping the edges of tables and desks as if holding the physical world together would prevent the collapse of everything he had built, including his marriage. His mind replayed the moment he discovered the theft, the camera footage of Nikki's movements, the subtle look on her face when she handed the drive to Jack. Each detail burned into his memory like molten iron, unerasable and searing. Nikki, aware that Victor's investigation was ongoing, started to experience the creeping fear of exposure, and yet, despite the growing panic, she felt a strange, almost tragic sense of justification. She had acted out of what she believed to be necessity, and even though the repercussions were devastating, in her mind she had prevented a far greater disaster. And yet the guilt gnawed at her relentlessly, manifesting in insomnia, trembling hands, and endless self-questioning. Had she truly acted in the interest of the greater good? Or had she simply protected herself from the man she feared becoming? As Victor mobilized his most trusted lieutenants to track the AI's movements, he discovered subtle anomalies in Newman's network systems, signs that someone had not only stolen data, but had meticulously masked the breach. The revelation hit like another blow. Nikki had anticipated every contingency, had calculated every possible countermeasure, had ensured that her act of betrayal could not be easily reversed. In essence, she had outmaneuvered Victor in a domain he believed he dominated. The sheer audacity of it left him reeling, and for the first time in decades, Victor felt powerless, humiliated, and painfully human. Jack Abbott, meanwhile, pressed forward with his plan, capitalizing on every opportunity created by Nikki's actions. With the stolen AI secrets, he was able to predict Newman Enterprises' responses to crises, manipulate shareholder confidence, and even subtly undermine Victor's trusted executives by feeding them misinformation. Every move was executed with precision, yet every success carried the weight of moral ambiguity. Jack understood that without Nikki's betrayal, none of this would have been possible, and that realization added a layer of complexity to his usual ruthlessness. The alliance between Nikki and Jack, though unspoken, became a source of constant tension, as both navigated the precarious balance between achieving strategic goals and managing the emotional consequences of their choices. Victor, consumed by rage and sorrow, became increasingly erratic, issuing sweeping mandates, calling emergency meetings at all hours, and unleashing verbal assaults on anyone he perceived as complicit, including long-standing allies who had done nothing more than question his decisions. His employees walked on eggshells, fearing the intensity of his wrath while simultaneously witnessing the profound pain that clouded his eyes. Even his most loyal executives, such as Ashley Abbott, feared the depth of Victor's heartbreak, knowing that a man who had survived countless betrayals, blackmails, and corporate assassinations could now be broken by the very person he loved most. Meanwhile, Nikki's attempts to reconcile with Victor were met with silence and cold avoidance. She reached out, leaving messages, visiting Newman Towers under the guise of concern for the company, but Victor's responses were terse, clipped, and distant. He could not forgive her, not yet, not when the wounds were so fresh, the betrayal so intimate. Their shared history, the marriages, the children, the countless battles won and lost together, was rendered fragile, overshadowed by the magnitude of her actions. In the midst of this personal and corporate chaos, other players in Genoa City watched closely, sensing opportunity and danger. Sharon, aware of the delicate dynamics at play, attempted to mediate, warning both sides of the potential fallout if the war escalated beyond repair. Phyllis, ever opportunistic, considered exploiting the situation to her advantage, while Adam and Abby analyzed the situation for potential gain, though even they were cautious, understanding that Victor's pain made him unpredictable and potentially lethal in his decisions. As weeks passed, the city itself seemed to hold its breath, watching as Newman Enterprises wavered, as stock prices fluctuated, and as Victor and Nikki danced around the precipice of personal and professional annihilation. The media sensing scandal began to report on the so-called AI wars, speculating on corporate espionage, marital strife, and the possibility of Jack Abbott overtaking one of the most powerful men in Genoa City's history. For Victor, each news report felt like salt in an open wound. For Nikki, each headline reinforced the crushing weight of her guilt. Despite the chaos, Victor's brilliance remained undiminished. Even in Heartbreak, he formulated strategies, drafted contingency plans, and considered retaliatory measures that could regain him control. But the personal cost had shifted his priorities. No longer was this purely a corporate war. Now it was deeply personal, emotionally charged, and fraught with the potential for irreversible damage to everyone involved. He found himself questioning loyalty, love, and the very meaning of power. What use was a company empire if the woman who had been his partner in every battle, in every victory, could so casually, so deliberately, turn the tables and use his creation to undermine him? The more Victor pondered the situation, the more he realized that Nikki's betrayal was not merely tactical. It was symbolic. She had removed the foundation of trust that had sustained their marriage and in doing so, forced him to confront vulnerabilities he had long suppressed. Fears of abandonment, of irrelevance, and of emotional failure. And as he wrestled with these revelations, Jack's maneuvers grew bolder, the AI-driven disruptions to Newman Enterprises becoming increasingly sophisticated. Entire projects were halted, subsidiaries restructured without warning, and loyal employees bewildered, all while Jack maintained an outward appearance of calm and professionalism. He understood that victory in this battle required patience and precision, and that the emotional turmoil of Victor's personal life could be leveraged as effectively as any financial maneuver. Nikki, caught between relief that the immediate threat she had perceived was mitigated and despair at the destruction she had caused in her marriage, began to spiral emotionally. She confided in trusted friends, admitted her fears, and sought solace in support groups and therapy sessions. Yet the shadow of Victor's anger loomed constantly. Her every decision was second-guessed. Her every action weighed against the potential fallout, and the tension of living under the weight of betrayal became a near-constant companion. Victor, meanwhile, began to mobilize allies outside of Newman Enterprises, contacting legal advisors, financial consultants, and even political connections to find a way to regain control. Every meeting was charged with emotion, every phone call a calculated strike in a war. He now understood to be as much about trust and relationships as it was about corporate dominance. He could no longer separate the personal from the professional. Each was intertwined, each influenced by the other, and each demanded mastery in order to survive. And as the city watched, the tension escalated to an almost unbearable crescendo. Rumors, speculations, and whispered alliances swirled around Genoa City, each citizen a potential pawn, each revelation a potential spark for further conflict. Victor and Nikki, once the unshakable power couple, now faced a chasm of betrayal, heartbreak, and uncertainty so vast that even their most intimate memories felt distant and fragile. Jack, wielding the AI secrets with increasing confidence, prepared for a final maneuver that could topple Victor entirely, fully aware that every move carried risk, and that the consequences could reverberate far beyond the walls of Newman Enterprises. The city itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, aware that history was being written in real time, and that the next chapter of The Young and the Restless would be defined not only by corporate warfare but by love, betrayal, and the human capacity to endure heartbreak. Victor stood in the empty boardroom, the city lights casting long shadows across his face, and for the first time in decades, he felt unmoored, stripped of certainty. Every wall, every desk, every memory of victories past now seemed to mock him, a reminder that even the most powerful man in Genoa City could be brought low, not by enemies but by the woman he loved. Nikki, somewhere miles away, wrestled with her own torment, pacing her suite, feeling both relief and suffocating guilt, knowing she had altered the course of countless lives with a single decision. Jack, emboldened by the AI secrets, began implementing subtle, devastating strategies, each move calculated to weaken Victor's grip without immediate exposure. Yet despite the chaos, the emotional core of the war remained painfully human. Betrayal, heartbreak, and the fragile, irrevocable fracture of trust. Newman Enterprises teetered on the edge of collapse, while Victor, fueled by a mix of rage and sorrow, plotted his next move, vowing silently that Nikki's choice would not be the end of their story or his empire. Genoa City held its breath, knowing that when these three collided, the fallout would be explosive, shocking, and unforgettable, changing their lives and the city forever.